I am super excited to talk to you today because we have had some very long discussions around talent, creativity, where it comes from. And I think these are things that a lot of creative people struggle with, and people who want to do creative things, of course, struggle with. Where does creativity come from? We're here today with my good friend, Pastor Tim Patterson. And you know how we met, right?
Through her,
remember?
Through Sabrina.
Yeah, your silly wife called me and said she wanted to be my assistant. My
That's
photography
correct.
assistant at weddings. She had no idea what she was getting into.
No one did.
And that was more than 25 years ago. And we did do that for a few years. And it was great because, it was my first couple years in wedding. Really, that was when I was very first starting that she came and did that. And it was nice to have someone like her at the weddings. And, she was good at kind of keeping me calm.
I was going to say, you were intense at that time.
Well, I was always intense. You have to be intense at weddings. Weddings are an intense business.
Yes, they are.
It's a lot going on. You got to think about a lot. And people who want to do creative things, of course, struggle with where does creativity come from?
Well, I absolutely believe it's a DNA creative thing that happens just within you. Every person's born with creativity of some type. It may be limited in others, but some are just gifted. They see things differently. They hear things differently. They feel the tactile response is different to other people through different ones. And I think once they begin to realize they just have this passion for seeing things, touching things, hearing things, saying things differently, they find ways to express it. You start out very young,
You do.
Somebody gives you a color, a box of crayons, and you want to do something with it, and you see something that no one else sees when you're drawing. And when you're looking at a cross somewhere, you see something that people may just look at and say, oh, well, there's a dog, but you just see so much more than the dog. You see everything about the dog, everything around the dog, everything leading where the dog came from, what he's doing, how he's reacting, how he's sitting, how one foot is placed differently than the other foot. It's just, you see things differently. And I think that is something we're birthed with. And not everybody has the same level.
Well, I remember when I was really young, 5 or 6 years old, everyone in my big family were taking piano lessons from this one older lady. Mm-hmm. And somehow my mom got my dad to let me take piano lessons. And I just latched onto that. And I would sit and play. They got me this old piano from somewhere for $100. Just the oldest thing ever. And I would play that thing constantly. And of course, as you know, I went on to do music professionally for 20-something years. And it was always something that, it was a gift. I wasn't the most gifted musician necessarily. I was gifted in my ability to hear. I could always play by ear, which is truly a gift.
Very much a gift.
Of all the gifts that I think I've gotten, being able to play music by ear is the most obvious gift, because I can literally listen to something and sit down and just play it. And now I couldn't run scales like, some people could. Being gifted can be a curse and a blessing.
Yes, it is.
Because I was so gifted and able to hear music, I didn't want to do the technical part of learning the scales. Now, I did learn how to read music, and I am very technically proficient as a musician. But even now, one of my greatest regrets is that someone wasn't able to communicate to me how important it was to learn scales and what a difference that would make.
It sometimes makes you lazy.
Exactly. It makes you
lazy.
Because
it just comes so natural to you.
Exactly.
I see this in my realm, in the ministry. I see young pastors and young preachers who just, we call it, have the it factor.
Mm-hmm. The X factor.
And they just have it.
Yeah.
And it just comes so easily to them that many times they short short themselves, and they take shortcuts, and they don't really pay the price that they need to get the depth that they need, because it just comes so easy to them to express it, to say it.
Right.
They can walk up and almost mesmerize, the true sense of that word, mesmerize a group of people.
That's been something going on forever. Jesus had that.
Yes, he did, but these guys, Jesus had it a little
differently. Okay, yeah, maybe I jumped. A rock star has that. Mick Jagger has it.
Yes. He's
not the greatest singer.
Oh, no. Well, you think about Willie Nelson, horrible singer.
Madonna.
Great phraser. He can phrase wonderfully.
And write music.
There's just so many out of that we can pick one after another. Their voices are not that good, but their presentation, their expression, their connection with people is what matters. Well, anyway, I see a lot of guys do that, and they'll take the easy road and not do the hard things because it just comes so naturally for them.
Well, yeah.
I've always been able to play by ear mainly. That's how I played when I play music. When I started playing drums, it just came very naturally to me. It was easy. I could hear beats, I could hear syncopations. My hands just worked like that. It just came easy.
And it made it not as much work.
Right. And I did not pay the price in other musical areas that I should have.
Yeah. So what do you believe the importance of a dream is?
Oh, well,
that's a deep subject.
Yeah. If you don't have a dream or vision for something, you can get frustrated quickly. Dream and vision it gives you a place, one, to be creative, and a place to go and create.
Right.
It's both. It's the atmosphere in which you create and you think about it. It gives you little avenues and little expressions here and there that you wouldn't have unless there was a dream there in that. And then it gives you a place to take it to. You just see it down the road.
People who are born creative and have this creative ability do tend to dream a little more vividly.
Yes.
Because they can see a vision.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that's part of the expression and expressiveness of an individual as they begin to utilize their creativity. It just, as like I said at the beginning, you just see things differently. And you hear things differently.
As a photographer, I certainly believe that I see things differently. I don't think I'm the best photographer on earth. I'm never going to be. But the joy of the understanding that I do see things differently has always made me feel a little more special. Mm-hmm. And it gives me the confidence needed to do the work to create something. Because I've allowed myself to believe that I'm special, and not special that I'm better than anyone else.
No.
But I know and have known since I was very young that I had special gifts.
Yeah, you're unique. I cannot draw a straight line. I am, as far as doing that, I can't with my hands. I am not really good at minute drawing and thing. I can look at art and I can see the wonder of it. I love art. I love all kinds of expressive paintings and I just love that. But I couldn't do it if I had to. I can't.
Well, I can't draw a straight line. Now,
I'm terrible.
My sisters could always sit down and draw just about anything, and I never could. So it was funny that in the end, I was the first one. Now, one of my sisters is a painter now, but I was the one who really showed an ability to do something with an art form, the music first and then the photography second, and I never could draw. And I believed that I could not paint because I could not draw. But I was able to do artwork to my photography, both digitally, the retouching and all of that. But then also, as you well know, my career was built on handwork that I did to photography after the print was made.
Right.
So I was able to do all of that. So one day, a few years ago, I just decided I could paint. And I went out and I bought some stuff and I just started painting.
Yeah.
And now,
and it's gorgeous. I love it.
3 or 4 years later, I have the confidence in what I've done, mainly because I've already got confidence built up in myself in another artistic medium, that I look at the paintings and I can realistically say, you know, this is good. This is not Van Gogh. Maybe this is not, well, I didn't really like Van Gogh's stuff, if I'm being honest. I mean, you know.
It's different.
I like what I create. And really, whether or not someone else likes it is not the point. But I never thought I could paint, so maybe there's hope for you. Maybe you could paint if you tried.
I'm getting a little older, and my dexterity is changing as I get older.
You can always finger paint, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I mean, there is that.
Yeah.
So one thing that has always interested me is talent versus skill, because there is such a difference.
Huge difference.
Huge difference. So you can have talent.
Right.
And you can never really realize that talent because you're too lazy to put the work in needed to build the skills needed. So let's say Tom Brady is perhaps the best quarterback of all time.
Right.
And everybody knew he was probably talented when he was young. They probably saw it early coming on. But had Tom Brady not had the fortitude to become the athlete he is, which he became the athlete he is. He worked out, he ate right, he did constant practice and discipline. Yeah. So talent versus skill is a big, big difference.
Yeah, I think you can have talent, but if you don't develop talent and create a skill from it, then it really, it's not, doesn't matter. It's got to develop.
Doesn't matter. We've all known really talented people who never did anything with their talent.
I know people who are brilliant mathematicians. Most of them don't connect with the artistic side, but what they do has an artistic flair to it.
Absolutely.
And how they create their formulas, their equations, and how theorems, where they develop those things out, there's truly a creative artisticness to all of that. People in the computer programming world, same. It's the same. It just and some of those it's because they have a propensity for a more technical thing. They develop the skills, and then out of the skills, they begin to find places of expression in that.
Well, right. And I mean, I believe if you go down the list, you could almost say that almost everything anyone does, there's artistry and creativity in it. I mean, whether you're obviously an interior designer, if you're a school teacher, I mean, it all requires you to be artistic and creative in some way. And a lot of people feel like they're not creative in any way, and I've always said, but everything has creativity, and it really, creativity is what makes the world go round. I mean, nothing would exist if someone hadn't decided to build this table. It wouldn't be sitting here if someone hadn't put the work into this, this microphone, and just because they could figure out the parts didn't mean that they could figure out how to make my voice sound good through this microphone. So creativity is just all around us, and I do believe that God's in all of that.
Absolutely, and that's part of the attitude that we have to have. It's a choice we have, an attitude. When we look at the creative creation of God, we have to get to the point where we say, I see God in all of this.
Absolutely,
I see Him in all of this, and His expressiveness and His wonderful creativity. When we look at the absolute mind-boggling variety of life that He's created, that just says He's a great artist, and that if we are made in His image, it's expressed in us, and in His image, we're artists in some way and other.
Yes,
we are, and it really pushes you back into focus of worship and who God is, when you really delve into your creativeness. your creativity.
Well, I know in moments of, as you well know, I created this whole line of flower photography, and I was very deep into finding flowers and, and really there were moments when I was in the studio by myself, because normally I photograph people. I'm a portrait photographer, and my work is based on other people's needs and desires. But this flower project was something that I could just completely make my own. And there were nights when I would be in the studio at 2:00 in the morning and a thunderstorm would roll in, and I would have music playing. And you could literally, as I sit here, have goosebumps right now, just feeling the power of all of that and knowing that there has to be more here than people want to allow themselves to believe.
It doesn't matter what vocation or place you have in life. I've always said that you do it to the glory of God. I've had guys say, well, man, I'm a plumber. Well, then be a God-ordained plumber.
Right?
I frame houses. We'll be a God-ordained framer. Just know that God has put you in that, and He's given you the ability to do it, and do it for Him and His glory. And I think the expressiveness, when you look back at some of our older artists, back in the 14th, 15th century and the 16th centuries, many of them very clearly talked about it being an expression of their wonder and awe of God, and that was the way they expressed it and worshiped Him, was through their art.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just as old as time is. And I could feel it so much when I was in Africa for the first time, and finally being able to see those beautiful animals. And the first time I saw a baby elephant, I just wondered, how can anyone believe that this just kind of somehow manifested itself through cells? And I mean, there's so much that you can't scientifically explain.
No.
And
don't try to, because one, God didn't express Himself in a way that said, well, all right, I'm going to put it out here where you can explain everything. When you look at creation and as I spoke earlier about the enormous variety, how in the world do you get that kind of variety that functions in order, and how it happens? And then within there are similarities that go throughout all the different flora and fauna, and you see the similar hand of God and His fingerprint through all of them.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing to look at creation.
I do believe that God is the ultimate artist.
Oh, absolutely.
And I believe that, some of the fragility of what goes on in our world today are people desperately trying to explain everything away, when if you could just understand that you're not meant to understand it all.
Well, we call it faith.
Well, right. And, the mental instability, I think people are just trying to understand it and figure it out. And you just can't, I mean, we have a hurricane coming today, and I've had 10 people call me and, well, aren't you worried? Shouldn't you do this? Shouldn't you do this? And I'm like, yeah, maybe ignorantly, but I just don't care. I believe it's going to be okay.
Well, you prepare. You don't be dummy, but you prepare.
But you can't be overly concerned, because we don't know where it's going to go. Really, at the end of the day, it will go where God wants it to go. It will go where it needs to go.
That's just a matter of faith and trust. And there are things that I look at in science that just baffle me, and I say, God, I can't figure this out. How does this work with you and stay co-equal, and how does it balance with what you say and what I'm seeing in science? These things, they seem to be incongruous. How do they fit together? And that's when He says, that's why it's called faith, Tim. Just have faith. Trust.
Well, with all the craziness going on, what just popped in my mind, and I know you've seen the Great Wall of China, yes? And the first time I saw that, I mean, especially when you get out of the tourist zone and you get out into the country more, and you see how that thing was built, it's just incomprehensible that someone actually built that.
Yes.
I mean,
you can see it from outer space. Amazing.
It's insanity. And yet somehow a human being figured out how to do that in the most unlikely circumstances.
Yeah, archaeology shows us so many things about man's ability when we think that you have to have all of this modern technology to build and do it. And they were making things out of stone and fitting them together, huge, massive things. And they fit together more precisely than we could do it today.
I know. You couldn't build that today.
No.
I mean, you really couldn't, I don't think.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. So I think of the parables of the brothers. There were the three brothers who were given the three gifts, and they were told to go out and use their gifts. And of course, the one came back and had done all kinds of amazing things with his gift. And the other came back and he had done some good stuff. And then the one came back and said he had dug a hole and put it in because he wanted to protect his gift. And to me, that is the story that makes me understand that we are all given gifts, and it's up to us what we take and we do with that gift. And that, in fact, God will be disappointed in us if we don't take and do something with that gift.
Yeah, the parable is called the parable of the talents, and each one was given a gift of talents or finances, basically some coins and things that they could go out and use. And one just brought back more, multiplied it over and over. Another one brought back some, and the other one said, "Well, I knew you were a hard person. I just didn't want to risk it, and so I just buried it. So here it is." And the whole thing, he says, "To whom much is given, much is required." And I believe that when we have great talents given to us, I think we're required to use those talents, and we should use those. And to squander the gifts and talents that God gives us is not pleasing to him and is not beneficial to us. That's what that whole parable is about.
Well, so there's a lot to be said about ambition and drive, whether it's good or evil, but it says many times in the Bible, and Jesus, in fact, said, take this and do something with us. Jesus wants you to be ambitious and driven to go forth and do things with what you have. But ambition can be a tricky thing to deal with. And where do you find that ambition? I mean, a great example would be us sitting here today. I mean, I've been in the arts for my entire career. I am definitely on the other side of the hill. And when I used to hear that back in the day, I wasn't really sure I understood it till now you're sliding down and desperately trying to not hit the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And yet I decided to start this YouTube channel, decided to start doing these podcasts, mainly because I knew I had the skill set to do it. And not everyone can sit and do this. I understand that. I mean, I had the perfect skill set to do something like this, yet I fought it tooth and nail. I mean, I have beat it to death in my mind 20,000 times over. And where does the ambition and drive to move forward in something that seems unlikely and almost ridiculous come from? And I just have to give up and say, in me, it's God. Yeah. And I choose to ignore it or not. And if I move forward with it, then I will be continued to be given the things needed to progress it, unless it becomes obvious that that's not going to happen. But it's all very confusing.
Yeah. Well, throughout the Bible, we're talking about God and His Word. The Bible is His Word and His instruction book for us and direction. And He gives us all kinds of examples in there as well. You go all the way back to Abraham. When he was called and he left and was going out, everybody said, "Well, where are you going?" "Well, I don't know." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." "Why are you doing it?" God said, "Go."
Exactly.
And he's, but you don't know where you're going to go. You don't know what's going to happen. Do you realize that it could be bad out there? It doesn't matter. God said, "Go." And it's very similar. And we find there are multiplicity of examples throughout Scripture and the Word, and where we have to step out in faith to do what God calls us to do. We go all the way to the New Testament talking about Peter, and Jesus is out walking on the water, and Peter's in the boat, and he says, "Come out here where I am." And most illogical thing on the face of the earth.
Right.
Peter's a fisherman. He knows what happens when you jump out of a boat, especially with no life-saving preserver or anything, or a rope or anything. He knows what's going to happen. He's, I'll drown. But it's not logic. It's faith. And there's something that when God says, come and do, you have to step out and go. And that is that's one of those intangibles and those imponderables you think, but it's something you can't, it's an undeniable. You just have to do it.
It makes me think of something that happened just the other day. I have a little great-great-nephew who you've not met. He's a year and a half old now. Mm-hmm. Well, we were in the pool, and you know what any kid is going to do.
Yeah.
So I've got a big pool, and there's 3 of us in the pool, and he's running up and down the side, and he'll come right up to the edge and act like he's going to jump in, and then he'll run back. And I've told, everybody in the pool, okay, be ready, because he's at the
One of these days he's going to do it.
He's going to walk right in. And sure enough, he's playing with us. And this child will just all of a sudden step right over the edge, and you better be there to catch him, because we know what's going to happen to him. But he doesn't think like that. He doesn't care. And the reason I brought it up is because little children, you can learn so much from watching children. They're not afraid until they're taught to be afraid.
That's it.
So they're willing to explore. They're willing to take that step into the pool because they haven't yet learned that bad things happen when you take a leap of faith.
Yeah, come to me as a little child. That's what he says, as a little child, childlike faith. Now, it's not blind, irrational leaping into the dark.
Right.
That's not faith. That's dumb. That's just dumbness. But faith is leaping into the fact that he's called you to do it. You hear and know God says to do it. Well, that's the fact of God that we're leaping into. We're not leaping out into nothingness and hope it works out. Maybe it will. Just as long as you hear and know and understand the voice of God and the call of God, then obey it. That's called faith.
Which I wondered if I should ask this question, because it's such a presumptuous question, I guess. Maybe a way to say it is, how do you know when it's God?
Oh, well.
Oh, that. Can anyone ever answer that question?
Yeah, I think you can know. Many times, we play the mind game. We may say, well, I really believe that God wants me to have a brand new Corvette. I just believe I'm supposed to have a new Corvette. And so we'll jump out and go buy one and get a payment book or whatever. A few months later, we're going, man,
maybe that wasn't God.
I don't think I should have done that. You see, when God tells you to do something, he also provides for you to do that. You don't have to get a payment book and all those kind of things. Unless he has specific plan for you and you hear him. But he will guide you into what you need to do. And that hearing is something that you train yourself to be attuned
Absolutely.
to. You don't, just like a musician, when they're listening, particularly a young violinist, you watch them. I don't have the patience to listen to young violinists, because their tone is not always good. It's flat or it's sharp or something. But what they're doing is they're learning to hear that.
Right. And
learning, and of course they have to make the correlation between their hands and fingers and their arm and what they're hearing. They begin to develop that to where it gets to be a good, pure, sweet tone. Same thing with hearing God. You learn to develop it. You listen. And there are mistakes, and sometimes it doesn't sound real good, and some things don't go real well, but you learn to develop that hearing of God. And also, I have found, and this is my absolute foundational belief, that God's never going to tell us to do something contrary to what he's already said in the Bible, in the Word. We can always go back to that and say, all right, he said don't do this here, but I think I ought to do it. No, you shouldn't, because that's contrary to what he's already said. There's things in the Word of God, and there's directives he's already given us in the Word of God that he's not going to go against, and he's not going to tell you to do something contrary to that. So we have a great standard we can read and understand and help us make many of those decisions. And then it's learning to hear him, to make the particular application of what we know.
Which brings us full circle to an art that's so commonly referred to as the muse.
Yes.
And there's been so many beautiful words written about what the muse is and how the muse directs the artist. But ultimately, if you believe everything we've said here today, then that is God. That is the creativity coming through you from God. And if you're, as an artist, if you're quiet and listen to that still small voice and trust that still small voice, then, you know, you take the leap, you make the paintings, you write the words, you start a podcast, you know, have the nerve to go photograph a wedding. I mean, you know.
And that is nerve.
I'm not sure it feels like God there, but no, I mean, I always loved weddings, and I always, you know, weddings are as old as everything in the Bible.
Right.
I mean, I always loved being a part of that. I always loved that moment when, you know, two people decided. Now you never know if it's going to work. You don't know really what ultimately is going to happen. But being a part of that was always very rewarding for me as an artist, even though I find it to be one of the most difficult ways to make a living. I always loved it. And
it's anything we do, it doesn't mean it's without stress. There's always going to be stress in things we do. If creating art was easy, everyone would do it.
Well, absolutely. And there's always going to be obstacles, and people will sometimes take those as, oh, well, I'm not supposed to do this because, you know, the air conditioner at my studio broke yesterday. Does that mean I should shut my studio down? I mean, you know, there
are going to be obstacles, difficulties. They're just, and you have to work through and with those things because they are going to take place. God never said, hey, I'm going to make life easy peasy for you. There's not going to be problems. He just, what he did say is that as you go through life, and it has all of its good, bad, ugly, and all of that, I'm with you, and I'll help guide you.
Well, it is a great example of this little story is that I have a niece who is a photographer, and she's been doing it 6 or 7 years now. Of course, I've been doing it many, many, many more years than that. And I said, well, the downstairs air conditioning at the studio finally blew up. I'm going to have to get a new one. It's going to be how many thousands of dollars? And she goes, are you telling me I shouldn't buy a studio? And I actually wrote her back and I said, no, actually, I'm not saying that at all. I said, buying the studio was the smartest thing I ever did as a business owner. You know, I've worked there all of these years. Right. And when I ultimately sell it, it's worth so much more than I paid for it. Yeah, I'm not happy I have to spend money on a new air conditioning, but it's like buying tires and underwear. I mean, nobody cares, you know, but it's the worst thing ever. But it won't be the worst thing ever when it's 100 degrees and the studio's nice and cool.
And you learn so much in that studio. You started out in film.
Oh, yeah.
In 35 millimeter film.
Oh, yeah.
And the developing and the inconsistency and just the faith of taking a film picture.
Right.
A photograph.
You couldn't see it on the back of the camera.
The faith that you took rolls and rolls of that, and you were expressing that by faith. And just think about how you started there, and then it finally moved to digital, and the leap of faith to buy digital and go digital, and the enormous expense it was at the start of digital, and all that you had to do in that. And is it really going to work? Is it going to happen? Is this a new genre? Is it really going to be something that I can work with? Every one of those you learned, and you've taken steps of faith through that. And then as you learn to, as you started out, taking a photograph and then developing, having it printed, and then enhancing it, adjusting it by hand. Now you do that on a computer screen. And there's things that you do so much differently. I mean, you can still do the other, but it's just
completely different.
But it's different.
And at the beginning of my career, I thought I would never use a computer. Yeah. I really did not think. I mean, I was at the beginning of my photography career when the internet started, and everybody thought it was a phase. And we bought a computer. And we sat and we looked at it because
Who
we
thought
had no idea how to do it.
Who thought Google was going to be anything? Google, when I first heard the name Google, I go,
That's dumb.
that's dumb. I did.
Absolutely.
Google, that's dumb.
And remember AOL when it started
yes.
up on the thing and how silly that sound was and where we've come now. And now, we're going to have flying cars. I believe if we hang on another 10 or 15 years, we will actually possibly see a flying car. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but I do believe.
There's going to be things like that. When you look at where AI, artificial intelligence, is going now, it's just as scary a leap for anyone working in that medium as they move into the next.
Absolutely.
It's just, and my youngest son and his wife, they work in that area of AI and some other things, and they're programming now, and they depend on that. But it's going to change everything, and it takes faith.
Well, it already has changed a lot of things. I mean, in my business, I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, this AI is just going to put us all out of business," and I'm like sitting back going, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so," and I really don't. I mean, I fully believe that there will be services that, like taking a portrait of someone. In fact, I heard a big discussion the other day on something, and it was a couple of AI guys, big guys up in the whole, thing. And they're like, well, the people who are not going to lose their jobs are people who offer a service that require a personal touch. And they said, like a portrait photographer,
yes,
AI will never be able to take that, never be able to take that picture. They cannot see
through the eyes of the giftedness of a person.
Absolutely.
Can't. That's the godness in us that AI will never have. That's why it's artificial intelligence, and we have true God-given intelligence. There's a big difference.
Yes, hugely.
They're similar,
big
but
difference.
they're not the same.
So, being where I am in my career now and doing the things I've done in my life, and I meet a lot of young artists and photographers and musicians and writers, and they struggle so with what's commonly referred to as imposter syndrome. And we all struggle with that.
Right.
That's not, I think the misunderstanding that these young people have is that that ever actually fully goes away. I mean, both of us are very accomplished in our given careers. And I think both of us would be willing to admit we still suffer from that sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Not to the degree maybe we did when we were much younger.
You heard people tell you when you start out, well, fake it until you make it. Yeah, I get that. I understand what they're saying. It's saying have confidence in what you're doing until you're fully developed in what you want to do. I understand, and that's just a confidence builder. But there are times, I think, oh, man, am I really doing this? Am I making a difference? Have I really accomplished anything? There are times, and, you'll get that, and you'll feel that. But then I'll step back, and God will say, you're fine. You're doing what I told you. Just be obedient. And just keep going.
Well, and I think for me as an artist or photographer, it has become abundantly clear in the last little part of my career how much I've created and how much I've brought to people. It's not that I feel like I've changed the world and people are going to remember me. I've heard one of the most powerful businessmen recently, a young man who's made hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. He is the it kid right now. And he said yesterday in something I heard, look, nobody's going to care about me when I'm gone. He goes, look, who cares about Napoleon? I mean, God saved the queen. Nobody thinks about her. She's only been gone a few days. I mean, maybe her family, but it doesn't matter what you reach in life, who you are or what you accomplish. Your legacy once you're gone is very small. Yeah. So
there may be some portraits around about you. Some may hang on a wall somewhere, but they won't hang on a wall forever.
And so with all of that said, it comes to me that how I am able to give back to the people in my everyday life, the clients that I serve, the people that I know. I work with lots of sick children, and there have been many unfortunate and sad situations where I have created the last portrait for a family, and often we knew that going into it. And, that God has given me the ability to give that gift to that family, something that will truly live on. I mean, because as we document our time here on earth, photography, at least in the last 200 or 300 years, I guess, has been the way to do that. And you will go and you will find a physical picture printed, because we know that digital goes away. Digital is something that will not be able to be preserved as technology changes. Right. One of the biggest problems I have in my business is trying to hang on to stuff as the technology changes. We started out with, the floppy disk.
Yeah.
And then all the hard drives that would break, and then, CDs, which I never thought CDs would go away. And now they're completely gone.
I threw a bunch away just the other day
of
things that I had, because I don't even have a CD player.
Right. So now all of my images are stored digitally, and it frightens me, because I know that just this little hurricane that's coming through could wipe that out, no matter how meticulous I've been in trying to maintain all of that. We can't control that.
No, we can't.
But if you have a physical image in your hand from 200 years ago of your great-great-great-grandmother, whatever that means to you, that's something tangible that you have.
And I think people will hang on to those kind of things. There are certain things that are going to last. There are certain things that are not. And as you said, digital media has changed so much in how it is recorded and maintained. And there are all kinds of things that help transfer that. Sabrina just had a bunch of our old 8mm films transferred to digital files and thumb drives and all that. But think about it, 30 years from now, that thumb drive is not going to be effective.
Irrelevant.
Where's it going to be? It's in the cloud. Yeah, well, but things are going to change in the cloud. They're going to change formats, all that. I have sermons that I've done 20 years ago I can't even pull up now, because it's a format that's not even addressed on my computers anymore, and it's just a problem. So it's going to happen. Things change. They just do.
Well, this has been a great conversation, and I have always loved, of all the people on earth that I know, one of my top 3 people for sure that I would love to sit down and have this conversation with is you. And I'm so glad we made the effort to do this, because again, we made the effort to do this. It didn't just happen. As I look around, I think with the election coming up and where we are with the homeless situation, that the human race just seems so fragile right now. And when I talk to young people, or I try to encourage a new artist, I just sense a frailty in their being.
There's a lot of hopelessness, particularly in young ones, 20s, 20-somethings and maybe 30. There's just a lot of hopelessness from what they see, because they have more access to media in one day than we had in 1 year many times.
Well, and they say that President Reagan ran the country, if not the world to some degree, on less technology than we all have in our cell phones.
Yes, but I'm saying they're inundated with every talking head, ideology, philosophy, perspective, idea, and there's this inordinate force driving them that they have to be accepted. They have to be accepted in a certain group and genre. They have to stay within the boundaries, and if they get without, they'll be rejected. And, to me, that was, well, I can get by with that. That's no big deal. I mean, if you don't like me, that's fine. But their world is built around media. And when you get kicked out of that area of media and you're no longer accepted, you have that's where their friends were, that's where their family was, their acceptance was. That's what I'm getting to. It's that personal face-to-face relationship. It's that personal connection. It's that tactile touch and reaching out to somebody. You can't do that through Facebook or through Twitter or through Instagram or any number of ways. You can transfer information and idea, but you don't make the real connection. And that's what they're missing. And that's why there's so much hopelessness. They just don't have the connections.
Agree 100%. So how does one find the courage and the strength to move forward in these uncertain times? And I have said many times to friends of mine with a statement like that, the uncertain times have always been.
Yes, they have.
And we're not in a dire place now, even though it feels desperate to us as we move forward. Where do you continually find the courage and the strength? And I think for me as an artist, that's just been one of the biggest gifts I have been given. Somehow I found the confidence in what I do. I felt like I had been given a special gift. And I was always able to muster up the courage and the strength to take the next step and move forward. And how does one do that?
Well,
now?
Of course, I'll give you my perspective, as a spiritual perspective, as always. I think about Sabrina and I were in Greece this last year, and it was just, we were able to go to Athens and stand at the Parthenon and see all of the ancient ruins of the gods and goddesses. And I stood in a particular place called Mars Hill. It's where Paul stood. And we find that recorded in history as well as in Scripture. It comes from Scripture. He stood there, and he's looking out at this city literally surrounded by every god and goddess in the world that could be, every pagan philosophy, idea. And he stands there, and in the midst of all of that anti-Christianity, so to speak, he stood very strong. And he said, I perceive you're a religious people. I've always gotten that as comical, because he was saying, you have all the religion in the world, but you don't have a relationship. It goes back to those relationships. It's a relationship with God. It's a relationship with people. That's what motivates you and keeps you moving forward and driving forward. When everything else says quit, stop, you can't do it, the world's falling apart, it's not why do it, doesn't matter, that keeps you moving forward.
Well, we'll leave it at that. This has been a great conversation.
Thanks.
I am so glad that you came and did this, and I hope we get to do it again.
I do too. Susan, thank you. I've always cherished your friendship and enjoyed it, and we've always had these kind of conversations periodically. Sometimes you call me on the phone or I'll call you. We talk about things. So it's good to see you, and good to see you doing new things.
This has been fun. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. So thanks to my friend Tim Patterson for being here with us today. I hope you guys learned a lot. I think this was a great conversation, one that